There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn, the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here with a very special guest, a very dear friend of mine. We've known each other for years and years and years, and she is a bookish nerd like myself. Please welcome Candice from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Candice, I'm so delighted that we can have this conversation.
And I am delighted too. I'm a huge fan of your channel.
Oh, your check is
Your
check is in the mail. Candice and I go way back, so why don't we start with that? So how did we know each other, Candice?
We met in Irish literature at University of Saskatchewan in 1991. We were both honors lit students, but I had heard of you before. You were known as, in the gay community, as a major activist. You were known as being extremely intelligent. And Rob thought that we should meet. And I think it had to do with his astrological readings. Do you remember how into that he was?
Yes, I do. I don't think I knew anything about astrology until I became good friends with
He's
Rob.
actually, I mean, I don't believe in it, but he was really good at it.
Yeah.
Like the reading he gave me, I'm like, ooh, this is creepy.
I don't believe in astrology particularly, but I believe.
No, neither do I.
I believe in Rob, and I can't remember your sign now. Leo?
Aquarius.
Oh, we're both Aquariuses.
Yes, and that
Right.
was, you actually once kind of believed in it, I think. You did.
Oh, I did. I had less shame about admitting it maybe than I do now. So
yeah, and I think also the fact that we're both adopted.
That's right.
Yeah, so we had a lot of bonds.
And then I started dating your best friend.
You did?
Ah, that lasted
Yes.
10 minutes, but it was great.
Yeah.
And the last time I saw you was at my wedding.
Yes.
What was it?
Yeah, that was so amazing. And it's hard to believe that here we are.
I'm so glad we got married when we did, or it would have had to been a Zoom wedding.
Oh, yeah. No, your wedding was beautiful. Actually, I've been watching Schitt's Creek, and of course, just watched the last episode with their wedding. Have you seen it?
I have not seen very many episodes, but I like it.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. What kind of Canadian are you?
Well, I'm not much of a TV watcher anymore.
You know, I wasn't either, and I watched the first episode and I thought, this is so stupid. But there's something about the characters, and then I kept watching, and then I was in love.
Yeah, no, I heard that it gets better very quickly.
Oh,
it starts out bad. I watched the first episode too, and I was underwhelmed. But everybody says, keep going. It gets so much better.
Yes. Like
I love those actors and just all of the.
Oh yeah. So the last episode is a wedding, and I kept thinking about your wedding, and like I got all teary watching their wedding, and Siobhan and I were like, I'm not crying. Are you crying? Oh, it was so moving. It was such a beautiful wedding.
I was so glad that you were there. And you are a big reader. We bonded over our love of reading. We went to lots of literary readings together.
We did.
You read your poetry at a few too.
Yes, I made you come and.
Excuse me?
Force my friends.
Oh, this is getting nostalgic already. Nostalgically.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, we went to, I remember we did a road trip to Regina to hear Carol Shields read.
Carol Shields, and I loved her, and also it was Peter McGehee.
Blanche Howard.
Oh, that's right. It was the one that they did the epistolary novel that she wrote with Blanche Howard. That may have been the last time that I saw her at a reading.
Yeah.
I went to several of her readings. I can't remember which was the last one, but yes, that was special. And the other draw of that event at Koto Books, which I think is no longer with us. Is it Koto Books?
You know, I don't know. It would be very sad.
I heard it went out of business.
Okay.
It was a Regina publisher. Was Peter McGee's Doug Wilson had finished.
Yes.
That died of HIV before he could.
Yeah, that was so beautiful.
Doug finished it, and that was launched there.
Yeah.
Met him.
My cat is going into my bookshelf. One moment, please.
This is a very literary cat.
Just a minute.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Ridiculous. She's right inside. Just a minute. Excuse me.
Well, Candice is off to get the cat. Let me fill in something that kind of got lost because Candice and I were talking over each other. We are referring to a very lovely gay couple who sadly are no longer with us, Peter McGehee and Doug Wilson. Peter McGehee was an American-born Canadian novelist, dramatist, and story writer. He met the Canadian activist Doug Wilson, and they became partners from maybe the late 70s or something onwards. Doug Wilson, who was a predecessor of mine, I think he founded the gay group on campus, Gays and Lesbians at the University of Saskatchewan. Peter McGehee, his new gorgeous boyfriend, moved to Saskatoon in 1980 to be with Doug, and subsequently they moved to Toronto in 82. They were both diagnosed HIV positive in 88. Peter McGehee was also a writer, became a writer, and his first novel in a projected trilogy, Boys Like Us, was published in 1991, just after he died. I met Peter McGehee, and I won't say any more about that unless you buy me a drink. The reading that Candice and I briefly referred to in Regina was the book launch of his also posthumously published collection of short stories, The IQ Zoo, and that was published and launched in 1992. Candice and I and a group of us went down from Saskatoon to Regina for the book launch because Carol Shields was launching her book there as well, the one that she co-wrote with Blanche Howard. Doug Wilson, who was quite ill with HIV by that point, but he did come out from Toronto for the launch, and I met him for the first time. And like I say, he had created the gay and lesbian group on campus in Saskatoon that I later was president of, and we had quite the chat. The second novel in Peter McGee's trilogy, Sweetheart, came out in 1993. He had finished it, obviously, before his passing in 1991. But he had planned a third, and using his notes, Doug Wilson wrote that final novel in the trilogy that Peter McGehee had started. That final book being titled Labor of Love. He finished it just before he died, later in 1992. Labor of Love was published in 1994.
Get out. Hey. No, these books are not for you. Okay. All right. Yeah, I always think of, whenever I think of Peter, well, you and Peter McGehee, I think of you at the same time. Yeah, and we did that reading. I think it was AIDS awareness. Shawn Virgo was the host, and I read one of Peter McGee's poems.
That's right, you did. I had forgotten that.
No, and you read, I can't remember who you read.
Sam D'Alessandro.
Okay, but you had this like perfect pause when you read it, and it just made the reading so good.
That was a very memorable night, and it was for AIDS Awareness Week.
Yeah.
It was a reading of literary writing, poems, fiction, whatever, by writers who were living with or had died of HIV. And this was in the early 90s. So yeah, it was still pretty much of a death sentence at that time. We had such a good time planning it, and it was such an important thing, but we got featured two, and each of the readings was done by a different person in the community. We overdid it in terms of how many writers we featured. So it ended up being about a 4-hour event.
Yeah.
A lot of people, maybe 3 hours, but a lot of people left after their mission because it was too long. But Maria Campbell, the Indigenous writer, Saskatoon writer, she read one that was by an Indigenous poet or something. Yeah. And the who's who lived in Saskatoon at that time were there. I think back on that very fondly, and it's incredible. So I'm sure our reminiscences will continue to be threaded throughout the conversation, but I like to start these bookish chats, which have absolutely no structure, no agenda, other than to just talk about books, with a book that each of us have recently brought into the house, either a purchase or a library loan or something that we stole or whatever. So would you like to go first? What's your book?
Sure. It's Interior Chinatown by
Charles.
Charles Lee. Yeah, so there it is.
It won a big prize, the Pulitzer, maybe.
Yeah, I actually don't know too much about it at this
Yeah.
stage.
Oh,
And,
that's
and like, I don't like to go in knowing awards, and I just like to, I don't read biographical
the phrase
information.
we use on BookTube is to go in blind.
Yeah, pretty much.
It doesn't bother me to find out if it won a prize, but I don't even read the back cover.
Yeah.
I just
And
want
then
to
I
go
read
in
about them after. But
not knowing.
yeah, but why I selected this one is there is a story in the New York Times. It was part of the December project. And Charles, you had a piece called Systems, and it just blew my mind. It was about the pandemic. The New Yorker has been publishing quite a few pieces, short fiction writers trying to capture the moments, and it all feels too soon. Like it needed 2 more edits. And I'm talking some of the best writers in the world.
Right.
But his piece Systems was just, it blew me away.
Okay, well, if I can find that, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that because I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and it's just the typography and the way it was designed. I don't know. It's like, who's the narrator? Is the narrator an alien? What? Yeah, blew me away. Very fresh. And then I read another short story by him that appeared in the New Yorker, and again, just like such fresh approaches to narrative, and loved it. So I'm really looking forward to this novel.
That is awesome. It's on my radar. I haven't got a copy yet, but I will wait for your review. And if you like it, I will try it myself.
Yeah, and Siobhan is a huge fan
Of this writer.
of him. Yes,
He's must be American because I think he won the Pulitzer.
he is American.
Yeah. Well, we're off to a good start here. I have a novel that just came in the mail the other day, and it is by a Welsh writer. And I should also say, while I'm thinking of it, that we are doing this conversation on March 14th. I'm not sure that I will have it edited and posted during the month of March, but
Okay.
on BookTube, the month of March is the Irish Readathon. So I am up to my nipples in Irish lit right now. So,
good. I want to talk about Irish lit, actually.
We will. So, that's great. This is a Welsh novel. It's called The Mission House by Cerys Davies.
Okay.
Cerys, and Davies is spelled Davies, but the Welsh way of pronouncing the name Davies is actually Davis. So you don't pronounce it in Canada. I don't know much about this novel. A man flees his life in England to go into colonial India to escape his demons. Okay. So it's obviously historical. Cerys Davies has been on my radar for 2 reasons. Her short story collection, The Redemption of Galen, I think it's pronounced, Galen or Galen Pike, is one of the best short story collections I've read.
Really? I will have to read that.
Love it. And her last novel, it was a novella really, is called West. And she's a Welsh writer, but this novel is set, like some of those short stories were actually, in America. Does she live in America? No, she lived for 12 years in America. Okay, I didn't know that until right this minute. Now she lives in Edinburgh, so she's just all over the place. But
yeah,
West is a very American story told in about 150 pages, set in like the early 19th century, maybe 1815 or 1820. And a man leaves his daughter in the care of his sister because he wants to go down south because he read in the newspaper that dinosaur bones had been discovered, and he thinks that he could actually find living dinosaurs or something. So he goes on this trek with a indigenous guide, and it ends up being almost like a what's the word I'm looking for? Not analogy. It's almost a it's just got allegory? The allegory of America. Allegory is the closest word. The word. And it doesn't work for every reader, but I thought it was astounding. So I'm a big fan, and this is her newest novel.
Okay.
Just published this year.
Yeah, I love short fiction, so I will have to check out those short stories.
Yes.
I don't have your attention span. I'm not the, I don't love the sprawling Victorian novels.
Really? Well, I love it all. And I'm not sure about my attention span. Well, that's probably a good topic for us to Why don't we go with that? So my attention span has been radically altered by the digital age. So I can't concentrate on a book for more than about 20 minutes. And I need to take a break, whether it's a Twitter break or an email break or a bathroom break. But I can't just keep going. So the way that I read it a lot is that I'm always reading many books at the same time, and I read a book for 20 minutes, or I read a chapter, or I read 10 pages, and I put it down and pick up another book, and I cycle through them that way.
Okay.
How about you? Are you like that, or are you a monogamous reader?
I read a lot of magazines, like The Walrus, The New Yorker, and there's good fiction in both of those.
Sure.
So that is good for my short attention span. I usually have a hard copy book on the go, like a novel, and poetry books, short fiction, but I also listen to some audiobooks because then I can move around, because I sit for 9 hours a day. And so I don't want to sit on my butt all night. So it's nice that you can actually, like, especially when the author reads their own work, love that. Like just walking and listening to a novel.
I
Do you
relate
do
to
that?
all that. I do a lot of audiobooks. I have a complicated relationship. I have trouble finding an audiobook where the narrator is pulling me deeper into the story. Sometimes I find they keep me out, and I don't know whether that's going to work or not until I'm quite a ways in and I end up bailing because the audiobook narrator is kind of keeping me distant.
Okay.
But when it works, oh my God, does it work?
It works. I listened to this beautiful book, part of it read by him.
Okay, great. Now, this might be our first fight.
Ooh,
because I pretty much hated that book.
you did.
Yeah, I did. And we're not going to fight about it. We can talk about it. But,
you're the one you recommended his poetry to me.
yes, and I love his poetry, but I
love it too.
Yeah, this is probably some of the best poetry I have ever read. But well, I thought there were parts of On Earth Were Briefly Gorgeous that were gorgeous. I didn't think it worked because there was also, I thought, a lot of really terrible writing in it.
Okay. Did you find like maybe the narrative structure, it's a letter to his mother? Do you think that was part of the problem?
That was a bit above that was part of the problem that.
Right. Like I can see that.
But but for me, the biggest objection I had was that you were talking about
Edits.
It needed about 30 more edits.
Okay.
Because there was just I have a ranty review. It's not only, I do talk.
Oh, I didn't read it.
It's not on Goodreads, but on BookTube. It's a point review that another booktuber and I did, and I give examples of some of the sentences that I loved and some of the sentences that I hated. And it's a very controversial video because I didn't pull any punches. So
okay.
So yeah, I was very disappointed.
I appreciate that about you. I read, it was a Ian McEwan review, maybe it was Amsterdam, and you bailed on it, and you said,
no, I did finish.
So that confirms, that the white men have nothing to say. That was, it amused me.
I remember that review. It was terse and to the point, but yeah, I just thought it was like, I think I can almost quote it, the sentence, something about, this is what happened when white men write novels that don't include any women.
Okay.
Yeah, just nasty characters in that book. It just made me so angry.
Yeah, so Amsterdam, right? Because I used to devour everything he wrote.
Well, I think he has probably written some good stuff that I haven't read. That's one of the things I've read by him.
Yeah, but my literary tastes have really shifted.
Okay, tell me.
When I was younger, I love Fight Club, and I read some of these brutal stories and things that I thought were beautiful when I don't know, my 20s. I read them now, I'm like, that is absolutely awful and devastating, and this writer is mean. I don't know, it's just I guess as you get older, more experience, you soften up, and I love brutal, harsh, on the edge books before, and now I'm like, ooh, that's no, hell no.
You're softening in your old age.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem. Like I weep after like Alice Munro's stories, and I'm just like, oh.
I just read Runaway.
Oh, yeah,
That was outstanding. As
it
they
was. Yeah,
all are.
yeah.
So then, how would you describe your reading tastes today?
Siobhan and I talk about literature
I
every
didn't
Sunday.
remember that Siobhan was a big reader. I'm going to have her
Siobhan,
come on my channel.
Siobhan, yeah, I told her, I said, you should join us. And she's like, we'd all end up laughing. So we probably would.
Awesome. We're going to do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll
No,
probably have
she's
her on by herself sometime, and then have a three of you of a panel.
yeah, no, she did a master's at U of S and got quite far along in her PhD at Oxford.
English?
And, oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, she's like a very astute, careful reader.
That is fascinating.
And yes, so every week we select something to discuss and we take turns. And it's been amazing. It's the one thing that's kept me sane. The only time I missed our weekly meeting or talk was when I was in the hospital. So it's kind of like with all the upheaval and uncertainty with the pandemic, it's been my rock.
That is awesome.
And
now, how did you have these
I don't know. We just started. We started
talking.
talking.
I mean, did you do it through Facebook Messenger?
Oh, we usually use WhatsApp. Like we don't sit down and because I like to walk around when I'm talking.
That is great. And so you do like articles, poems,
everything. Yeah, like we pick a lot from the New Yorker, the New York Times, the Walrus, and then we realize like we really need to broaden. Yeah, I recommended Stoner.
Recently read Stoner, is that right? Or
no, I read it in 2017.
Okay, we probably read it about the same time. I loved it.
Yeah. No, you read it before I did and raved about it and said it was a perfect novel. And then I read it and agreed.
So I'm an influencer, hey? That's fabulous.
You're definitely an influencer, but there's like been some pretty scathing feminist critiques of it.
I am aware of that. And what's your take on those critiques?
It's a novel of its time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yes.
I didn't think of any of those things as I was reading it, and I haven't delved into the critique. I just know that it's a kind of a Marmite book in that some people really find it boring or just don't like it at all, but it also is, I think it's a perfect novel.
No, it's like the genre's called like the college novel. Yes. And there's another one that I think you gave a 5-star review by Sally Rooney, Normal People.
Normal People, and I've just been snooping around on your Goodreads, and you weren't quite as big of a fan.
No, I actually wrote a scathing review and then deleted it. So
why did you delete it?
Well, it was kind of a feminist thing. It's just I was really fascinated by the class issues and the relationships, but then I have no problem with sex, believe me, but the focal point became sex. And then when her boyfriend, who wasn't remotely attractive, started hitting her, I checked out. I disengaged. I thought, why? Like, and I mean, it was, self-loathing or whatever, but she really didn't care what people thought.
She being the main
she
character?
Being Marianne.
What do you mean when you say she didn't care?
Well,
that's interesting. She
seemed to have a level of self-acceptance earlier in the novel, and then it took a strange turn. Mm-hmm. Like it was just I think a problematic character development. And I don't know why the masochism was brought in.
Well, that is a critique, criticism, a strong objection to this book that I've heard before. One of my besties here on BookTube shares your opinion, and lots of other women absolutely love it. But it's people either love it or hate it, and have a political reaction to it or a reaction to the writing style. And I expected that I would probably not like it because I bailed on her first book.
Oh, really? Okay.
Conversations with Friends. And absolutely loved it. Thought it was a very accomplished literary novel, and I'm really excited that she has a new novel coming out at the end of this year. And
Yeah,
I didn't have any of those issues. I thought it was a beautiful love story, of friendship love.
right.
Yeah, and
I agree.
she was a very wounded character, and boy, there are lots of wounded people in the world, and it was a
Yeah, yeah.
beautiful location of that. Gender politics didn't enter into it at all for me, but
It was just sort of why that? I don't know. I thought, okay, so is this like a shades of gray? Like, do you want it next to that? Or like, is this a marketing thing? Or like, I don't know. It just didn't
no,
seem true to the character. It seemed to veer off.
I tend to end these disagreements by saying we all read different books when we read the same book.
Yeah.
Whenever I talk about it, and I read Normal People late compared to a lot of people on BookTube, and so I created all this suspense about what was I going to like it, was I not, because it's a pitched battle on BookTube. Are you pro or against Normal People? And even
Right.
when I did my video review, I kept everybody in suspense for the first 4 minutes until I finally said, and I loved it. So,
Yeah, I loved a lot of it though. I did.
yeah.
Yeah, and I thought the friendship was beautiful. But it just that didn't make sense to me. The character seemed to veer off, like she lost the plot with her characters.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, my friend Britta will be commenting and saying, yes, Candice, yes, I agree with you. So
Yeah, I still enjoyed it though.
you gave it 3 stars, right?
Yeah,
So
I would have given it 5 until that. until
so Irish Lit. Yes, you wanted to talk about Irish Lit?
well, we just did.
Sally Rooney, there you go. And
And that's what I loved about it. Like,
that's
yeah.
hilarious. I had a Zoom chat about the Booker, and I was complaining about how after they started letting Americans onto the Booker, that nobody from anywhere else in the world was getting on. It was only British and Americans. I said, when was the last time a Canadian was nominated for the Booker? And the guy I was talking to said, last year, Margaret Atwood. Oh, and Margaret Atwood's Canadian. She's so international
You're
now.
funny.
Yes, I do have my senior moments.
Hilarious.
I am reading so much great Irish fiction right now. The one that I would recommend to you, I'm only not even quite halfway through it, but I'm far enough into it that I think it's going to be a really great book. It strikes me as being very much of a Candice book.
Ooh, and what is a Candice book?
Well, I will tell you what this is, and then I would say that basically that's what a Candice book is for me.
Okay.
And you tell me if I've hit the mark. It's called A Ghost in the Throat by Doreen na Grifa, and her name is spelled in a very Gaelic way. She's a young writer. She's had a couple collections of poetry, and this is her first. Is it a novel? Is it a memoir? I'm not sure what you would call it, but it seems like maybe autobiographical fiction about her obsession for her whole life with a 17th or 18th century Irish poet, a female poet who wrote a very famous poem about the murder of her husband.
Ooh.
And when she discovered his body, she drank his blood and wrote this poem. It's a very famous poem, and this contemporary young Irish writer, Doreen na Grifa, has always carried a torch for this poet and this poem. And so she's written a book that's about her life as a young mother who had lots of issues in her past, and how she's always been so fascinated. And she goes on a quest because she finds herself actually living in the neighborhood where this poet had lived.
Wow.
And at the very end of the book is her translation of this poem, because it was written in Gaelic. And the writing is so beautiful, and it's all about poetry and womanhood
That's totally up my alley.
drinking blood. I mean, it's just screaming Candice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you should check that one out.
Drinking blood?
What are you drinking there, by the way?
Actually, it is cherry kombucha.
What is kombucha? I've forgotten. I used to
It's
know.
a fermented tea.
Fermented tea. So it's not alcoholic, right?
I think there's a little bit,
Okay.
but it's yeah, like it's like 0.05 or something, but it's got so much beneficial bacteria, good for the gut,
Great.
healthy,
Very good. And
tasty.
you and I used to be smoking buddies, and we
Oh
finally
my
given
God,
that
I
up.
can't even believe that.
Oh my God, we smoked our lungs out together. Jeepers.
Yeah,
How
and
long ago did you?
now I'm the worst. Like I can smell it, 4 blocks away, and like instant rage. Just like, oh, someone's smoking. I mean, I always knew I would be one of those ex-smokers, so but it took a long time for me to be done, and it was so hard quitting.
How long ago did you quit?
Ooh, like 15 years ago,
Okay, so it's been about
16,
almost
17. It's
six,
a long time.
six and a
Like, I
half,
think I've been, yeah. You?
6.5, I think.
Okay, good, good.
I quit just after soon after I met Kenji. He
I
still
know
a
why.
smoker, but yeah, so
I know that story. When the addiction is broken, you realize how disgusting it is. The smell, the way it, clings to clothing and that in your throat and people like hacking when they laugh. However, addiction is addiction and I have, empathy for that. You have to get, hit your bottom or it's not easy.
did you find it hard to were you always smoking when you were reading, and was it difficult to kind of get your
Oh
groove
my
back as a
God.
reader? Yeah.
Well, yes, there was that. And I couldn't write. Like it was my thinking tool and it straightened my thoughts. It helped my attention span. So when I quit, I was working as a journalist and I became unhinged. And my poor friends. But I was committed to just getting through it and finding new ways to
Think.
focus or not.
One of my very most favorite New Yorker cartoons, which came out long before when I was still very much of a heavy smoker. I think it was in the mid 90s when I went to Toronto. I remember this cartoon because at that time, New York City had gone smoke free, so you couldn't smoke in any restaurants or
Right.
bars. And in the cartoon, the people at the table in the fancy restaurant, call the waiter over and to complain, and they say, "Tell those people at the next table to stop talking about smoking."
Too funny. Lorna Crozier actually wrote a
I
wonderful poem
remember that.
about quitting smoking. So
Yes.
tag that.
Yes, she did.
She nailed it. Now, she was never a smoker, but
He
she
was.
watched Patrick Lane
Yes.
quitting smoking.
Patrick Lane, sadly, is no longer with us. Have you kept up with
Yeah.
did you keep up with his writing? I didn't.
I actually have a biography.
Of him.
And yes, my pandemic meltdown, everyone's had their pandemic meltdown moment. And mine was like taking all my books off my bookshelves because they're everywhere and I couldn't find anything. And I was just like, oh my God. And I just like hurled everything off. And that was my pandemic meltdown. And then I put everything in alphabetical order.
Oh,
And
what a concept.
yeah, so I discovered so many books that I actually am going to send you one. Catherine Hunter's latest book of poetry.
I
I
saw
bought
it on your Goodreads. That name's familiar because of you. Is that why I know her?
Yes, she's a wonderful poet, novelist, and professor in Winnipeg. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I was it was a mentorship program through the Manitoba Writers Guild. And she was my mentor. And she was wonderful. And I wrote that series of poems about the women in Pablo Picasso's life and sort of looked at the paintings, from the other side and wrote a series about that.
Oh.
And she came across, it was like a anonymous selection and we got paired and she left my poems and she's wonderful.
Oh, she's your mentor.
Yeah, that was like 1998.
So I'm dying to ask, was one of the women that you wrote about one of Pablo Picasso's women Princess Margaret?
No.
I read the latest biography of
Ooh.
her called 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret.
Okay. Maybe it's time to revisit that manuscript, new material.
The title is Ma'am Darling, 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret by Craig Brown. It came out about 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
A really innovative structure to the biography. It was just like little essayistic nibbles, nuggets, rather than a continuous narrative, although I thought the structure kind of broke down. And I loved it when I read it, but maybe I've just evolved. I've become more woke because now in thinking back on it, even though it was just a few years ago that I read it, I think it's pretty sexist depiction of her.
Okay.
But I learned through this book that Picasso was obsessed with Princess Margaret when she was in her younger hot days.
Huh, I didn't know that, and I read a lot about him.
He didn't, I don't remember that he ever met her, but there's in his maybe diaries or letters that have shown up where it was like obsession, like creepy obsession.
Well, that's fascinating.
Glad for her sake that they never met.
Yeah.
So you might want to check that book out just for that section or whatever. I'd love to actually talk about the book. I would consider rereading it to talk about it with you.
Okay.
And maybe Siobhan. Okay, so we have to start thinking, sadly, about winding this conversation down. But
sure.
I am going to tell you right now that there's going to be all kinds of comments below. And this idea literally never came into my head until about 10 minutes ago. But Candice, you should start a booktube channel.
Ha!
You have the perfect personality for it. I don't know why it never occurred to me. But I mean, look at this
That's
conversation.
very flattering.
It's just been so animated and you're a natural. So think about that. But in the meantime, before that or even after that, I want to have you back very soon. So
Yes.
Tell me about one other book that you're reading now, and if possible, one book that you're going to be starting in the near future.
Okay, so I found that I was reading a lot of male gay literature.
Gay male literature.
Yeah. And I wanted to hear from women. And so I think Polar Vortex was shortlisted. I think it was
I
shortlisted
saw
for the
you were
Biller
reading
Prize.
that Shani Mutu.
Yeah, so I started reading that. It's lesbian couple. There's a friend from her past who's coming to visit her, and it's caused quite a upheaval in their relationships. Her partner is snooping through her stuff, and she's getting all these vibes, and I mean it's very much like an interior, but it switches perspectives, and there's not enough sex.
Not enough. So there was too much in normal people.
No, there wasn't too much sex. It was just that was just the center, and it sort of overtook the other interesting elements. Yeah, but so that's what I'm currently reading.
Great.
No.
I've heard good things about it.
I actually want to get further on. Like right now, I'm thinking like, what the hell? Like, come on.
You're
Like,
not sure about it?
like,
Yeah.
like just walk into the other room and ask her flat out, like, what are you guys doing? And it's just like, this is like half a book, like about this guy coming to visit. Like, come on. Like compared to, I was just thinking of all the male gay literature I read. Like it's kind of like bed death in this book. I don't know.
Well, have you ever done a comparative analysis of gay male porn and lesbian porn?
I have not.
I have. What was the name of the? About 20 years ago, there was pay TV channels or cable channels where there was a queer channel in Canada. Was it called Queer TV? I don't remember what it was. I don't think I think it's long disappeared, but I subscribed to it. It was right around the 2001. And they had gay porn in the every night late at night, explicit gay porn. And I used to have to close my curtains because you could see my TV from my window in Vancouver. But I think once a week they had lesbian porn, and I was just curious. So I watched it. And I had a blog at that time, and I remember writing a humorous blog entry because I thought, oh my God, it's a lesbian porn video. they're processing their feelings.
Yeah,
You had to wait for like
maybe
20 minutes for it to get to sex. We used to always say, Candice, you're a gay man trapped in a woman's body.
I think I am.
And I think you took it as a compliment. I did.
I kind of am.
I'll have to kind of rethink that then, because I don't want anybody to think that it is a compliment, but I don't want it to be backhanded against women. So
Yeah.
we used to jokingly say that. And then there's the old joke: what does a lesbian bring to her second date? A U-Haul. What does a gay man bring to his second date? What second date? So
exactly.
can I put your Goodreads in the show notes? If you
Sure.
don't want me to do that, I won't.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to put your Goodreads link so people can follow your progress with this novel and all the other ones you're reading. And what's something you're planning to pick up?
I actually picked up David Bergen's latest novel. He's a Winnipegger.
Okay.
And I've enjoyed all his other books.
Okay.
Yeah, he's got a really clean writing style. I like the way he writes about women.
Is this the one, is his latest one the one that was nominated for Giller last year? Or is it something newer than that? Is it Here the Dark, a novella and stories?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was on the Giller long list in 2020.
So I just picked that up.
Okay. So interesting. I have not read it, but I had my friend Lindy. Did you meet Lindy at my wedding?
I believe I did.
Maybe. She's a voracious reader. She leaves you and I both in the dust.
Really?
It's a book
You? You're way more voracious than I am.
Well, she reads a book a day.
How many do you read? Like, how do you do it actually? How many do you read a year?
Usually over 100.
Yeah, that's
up to 150.
Yeah.
But so she was on the Shadow Giller, like just a bunch of book bloggers that shadowed the Giller.
Okay.
And I had her on my channel. So I'm going to put a link to her video and you can watch it. I can send the link to you in the meantime. But she was not a fan of this one. And her critique is quite entertaining and interesting. And hopefully, but maybe you shouldn't look at it until after you've tried it. I hope you get along with it better than she did. But she had interesting thoughts on it. Yeah,
I go in cold, and then if there's something that strikes me in a story, then I'll go digging.
That's right. Yeah. So don't watch this until after.
Okay.
Well, this has been an absolute delight, and I hope that you know that I'm commandeering you to be a very, very regular guest on my channel from now on. I don't know why I didn't think of doing this years ago, but this has been fabulous. Thanks, Candice.
Thank you so much.